Good evening to all of us. This is Miss Crizia May P. Dingding, PhD at LM student of Philippine Normal University. This evening, we will be discussing the Chapter 5 of The Effects of Educational Leadership by Ronald W. Ribor, written in St. Louis University in Boston. Chapter 5 will be discussing on ethical considerations in leadership at the school district level. Once again, good evening everyone, especially to our course professor, Dr. May Apat. Effective human relations are essential in educational leadership. It requires concerted, organized, and persistent effort from administrators. The core principle of effective human relations is recognizing the inherent dignity of each person, which justifies their right to full community participation. This interdependence emphasizes the need for valuing individuals and ensuring their engagement within the community. Thus, we conduct regular meetings with our stakeholders, especially during the beginning of the school year and during the creation of our AIP or our budgeting needs. We need to present it to our stakeholders, di ba? Ethical considerations in educational leadership involves contractarianism, utilitarianism, and professionalism, which will be discussed as we progress further in our discussion for this evening. This will also address issues like vision creation, cultural assessment, school reform, and accountability. Professional organizations provide ethical guidelines to help leaders navigate the complexity of their roles, especially in educational institutions. The first theory discussed in this chapter is the theory of social contract by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Rousseau's social contract theory holds that people is free when it is governed by its own laws. This will be accomplished through a general will, which is like a collective idea of a common good, and through election of members of the government. To summarize the discussion of this social contract theory according to Ribor, in Emile, Rousseau proposed that education should nurture children's natural creativity and involve direct interaction with people and situations. He also emphasized the role of parents as the natural teachers who should approach learning with love and sympathy. His first principle was that man is born free, arguing against the absolutist societies of his time. Absolutism means that they believe that the moral laws are universal and unconditional, where he insisted that he introduced the concept that man has a general will. We call it volonté générale, or the will of the people as a whole. This believes on the decision of the majority. This is where individuals submit their personal will to the collective will of the majority. This theory implies that school districts, as well as government agencies, should involve the community in educational policy development. That is why, again, as I have mentioned earlier, that during the creation of our policies, the creation of our AIPs, we always involve our PTA, SPTA, or HPTA, including our local LGU, so that they will be participating in the creation and the finalization of such policies. The administration must foster two-way communication with constituents to uphold the social contract theory and ensure the general welfare. So here are the ethical issues that should be addressed for the contractarianism. The first is on the creation of vision and goals for a school district. So our VGMO is of course crucial for achieving change. This is exemplified by movements for equal education opportunities for minorities, women, and people with disability, or as we call it in DepEd or in any educational institution, is inclusivity. The Board of Education and the Superintendent are responsible for creating the process of developing the vision and goals and not setting them unilaterally. A strategic planning process should involve all the stakeholders, as I have been emphasizing, during the beginning of this discussion. These are the parents, the students, community members, teachers, staff, and the administration. Collaboration within these groups of people will ensure decision-making legitimacy and aligns with the social contract concept, in which we are going to consider the will of the majority. Leaders believe in the potential of all children to learn, inclusion, high standards, and diverse learning methods. Lifelong learning, professional development, cultural diversity, safe environment, societal preparation, risk-taking, trust, family partnership, business and political dialogue, and of course, community involvement. This also discussed the elements of strategic planning. What are these elements? These are the necessary funds allocation, of course, the selection of process initiation, students' achievement data evaluation, community culture analysis, planning process deadlines, needs assessments, resources determination, vision and goal setting, progress benchmarks, strategic plan communication, and of course, periodic evaluation so that we will know what went wrong and what went right. The next to be addressed for contractarianism is on community cultural assessment in schools. Ethical leadership requires integrating the school culture with the diverse cultures of the community. I believe this was discussed earlier by Ma'am Loinda in her reports in the previous chapters of this book. So how do we assess the community or the culture of the community? First, of course, we need to identify the history, the values, the visions, the storytellers, what are the rituals, traditions, beliefs, even the heroes and heroines of the culture. These will help tailor the curriculum and instructional strategies. One of the best practices of our division is of the schools division of the Bislig City is the crafting of the localized intervention materials that are highlighting the cultures of Bislig City, including the hero and heroines. One of the literature that was published is the one that discusses about the legend of the Tinoyan Falls, which is one of the prominent tourist spots in Bislig City. So this could be one example for this. Next would be the exposure to diverse role models, which help students develop a positive self-image and influence their career choices. That's why we invite guest speakers in our graduations to help motivate students and to motivate them, uh, inspire them that someday, somehow, they could be one of the guest speakers for one of the success stories that will be told in the years to come. Next would be celebrating traditional feasts or holidays of various ethnic groups, which enhances cultural appreciation and understanding. One of the practices of the Philippines is that every month we celebrate different kinds of feasts to commemorate all of the all of our traditions, no, giving thanks to all of our saints in different cities. Here in Bisig City, we celebrate the Tinoyan Festival, Karawasan Festival, Sinulog Festival, and each province also celebrates that. So this could help us in enhancing cultural appreciation, especially for the younger generation. Celebrating the achievements of community members from different cultures underscores the importance and equality of every culture. These practices strengthen the social contract by acknowledging and integrating the diverse culture within the school community. The next ethical issue to be addressed for contractarianism is on school reform expectations. So what are examples of these reforms or changes that could possibly be undergone in the social contract? So this might include service learning, authentic assessment, no, the changes in assessment, computerized instructions, which is very much observed during this era, no, the digital era. incentive-based pay, privatization of services. This could include the ESC, the implementation of ESC or the granting of ESC. We have empowerment and site-based management. Superintendents must balance initiating quick reforms with ensuring the long-term integrity of the social contract. Rapid, rapid turnover in superintendencies, especially in large urban districts, can lead to cynicism and resistance among educators. We in the DepEd, we experience frequent turnovers of leadership in our districts and even in the division. We just assigned a new ASDS in our division, Ma'am Gloria. I think Ma'am Loinda knew her. So in the changes of leadership or in the changes of superintendents and assistant superintendents, even the movement of the principals and the PSDSS or the district supervisors, this could really lead to doubts. This could lead to resistance among educators, especially when the leaders in the current district is performing well, and then they will be a sudden or there would be an scheduled rotation of the changes in the in the principal. We really experience this, that we keep thinking about what would happen next, what would be the leadership style of our next principal, what would be the next style of our leadership style of our PSDSS. So this is really occurring, or it's happening in the field. So what are the conditions for ethical school reform? First is reforms must be seen as educationally sound by the stakeholders. So these reforms or changes in our policies should be explained to the stakeholders because they should understand it in their level of understanding. Reforms should effectively address significant problems, of course. The strategy for implementing reforms must be seen as viable. Is this achievable? No. Next, we have reasonable burden. Reforms should not place an unreasonable burden on education. Right now, we are experiencing a reform on our curriculum, which is the change from K to 12 to the Matatag curriculum. And this, we will be assessing if could this be a possible burden to the educators. That we'll find out very soon. Then there should be trust in leadership. Stakeholders must view that the superintendent or the supervisor or the principal is trustworthy and credible. So there are three principles that are discussed under the school reforms. First, we have the debureaucratization, which involves the reducing of the central office control and promoting site-based management. Central office should handle business and legal functions, while school focus on educational decisions. True site-based management aligns with the social contract philosophy, enhancing school district goals. That's why in the division office, we have two parts. We have the SGOD and the CID. Then we have different EPSS to supervise different learning areas so that the decision making in terms of educational decisions will not be focused on the central office. So we will know who's who and what's what when resolving certain conflicts. Or when problems arise, we will know who to go to. Next would be empowerment. Empowerment in social contract implies mutual obligations and responsibilities. Principals should have autonomy in decision making, opportunities for professional growth, and recognition of their professional status. Ethical issues arise when superintendents blame principals unfairly or when principals avoid necessary decisions. So that is why in the school community or the school culture should promote participative leadership in which the principal should always be open to the school faculty and then to be open to the PTA or the SPTA so that they will also know what is happening in the school. Next would be privatization. So again, this involves a shifting parts of educational enterprise to private sectors, which can include charter schools, performance contracting, and private operations of schools. These are the where the public services are being assigned to private sectors. The second theory presented or discussed in this chapter is the theory of utilitarianism by John Stuart Mill. Mill believes in a system of ethics according to which actions are right in proportion as they tend to produce happiness, wrong as they tend to produce the reverse of happiness. Mill believes that the pursuit of pleasure and avoidance of pain are the only motives in human behavior. So here are the principles under the theory of utilitarianism by John Stuart Mill. According to him, or according to this theory, actions can be judged by their intrinsic nature or their outcomes. For instance, school violence is inherently wrong and of course will produce harmful consequences. Actions that maximize happiness or minimize unhappiness for the greatest number of people, considering both short and long-term consequences and valuing others' happiness equally to one's own. Human history and past experiences guide current decisions, such as the general preferences for truthfulness over lying due to long-term trust. Mill differentiates between actions that fail to maximize happiness and those deemed wrong due to warranted punishments. Unjust acts violate individuals' rights, which society is obligated to protect based on general utility. Policies such as students' rights and responsibilities should aim to maximize students' happiness to create a conducive learning environment. Thus, the development of the student's handbook, the development of the rules and regulations of the school. However, there are misunderstandings for the utilitarianism theory of John Mill. They said that this theory promotes unrestrained freedom. But Mill refutes it by highlighting the negative long-term impacts of actions like lying or not telling the truth for the overall happiness. So what is the importance of educational leaders in this theory? So there should be positive orientation. Utilitarian principles will help maintain a positive outlook, countering the negativity that can arise in human interaction and ensuring that the pursuit of happiness will always remain the guiding force of educational administration. So what could benefit the general public is what should be followed. Ethical issues that will concern in the implementation or the principle of utilitarianism. So first is on student achievement. Student achievement is highly controversial with significant interests from boards, parents, and community. Educators fear being blamed for poor test scores, which don't fully reflect student success due to various external factors. And to be honest, this is really true. We, teachers, fear being blamed of the performance of the school kasi sinasabi agad nila, teacher factor. That's why um, the manipulation of MPS or even the manipulation of the literacy and numeracy tests is rampant or is happening in the field, di ba? However, that should not be like what is said here. The poor test results don't really fully reflect the student's success because there are other factors that could be basis for the success of the students. There could be success in sports, di ba? There are students who are performing not so well in academic, could be the goal getters in the SIRAM or the SIRAG. So superintendents must explain the school differences, the score differences, that the scores not really reflect what is happening in the school because this is crucial for funding decisions. While test scores are important, other measures like observations and grades matter too, and other activities also. A utilitarian approach focuses on improving education to maximize future happiness, benefiting students, parents, teachers, and the community by preparing students to be well-rounded and productive members of the society. So we should not measure our student success based on grades only or based on test scores, because there are other factors that could be considered when viewing the student success. Next is on curriculum development. Curriculum development is as it can either benefit or harm students, aiming to create a seamless curriculum that makes students well-rounded and productive. It must account for individual learning differences and provide support services like counseling to help students maximize their potential. Effective curriculum design and evaluation boosts happiness for students, staff, and the community by focusing on overall personal development. Utilitarianism guides this process by striving to maximize development and happiness for everyone involved. So how do we achieve this? How do we ensure that our curriculum will maximize the development of happiness for the students or for everyone? So that's why we do curriculum assessment at first, or pre-assessment, or pre-test and post-test in the end of the teachers. So we should know, or we should start where or to what our students need. The last ethical issue concerning utilitarianism is on human resource leadership. This function directly impacts the quality of education, as the effectiveness of educators is essential for a strong instructional program. Affirmative action ensures representation of women and minorities, while equal employment opportunity eliminates bias in hiring and promotions. Personal evaluation focuses on improving service quality through fair and objective assessment. That is why in the DepEd, there should be transparency, especially during ranking, no? The RQA should be posted, the rating should be posted so that everyone will know um, what went wrong in their application and what areas should be needing their attention or needs improvement. But despite these improvements in evaluation or personal evaluation, education professionals often face lower compensation compared to other fields. So why do you think this is happening? Why are we underpaid compared to other fields? Maybe that's the reason why some teachers, or there is an exodus of teachers going to other Asian countries like Taiwan, Thailand, even in the US. So let us reflect on that. However, for the utilitarian principle, this will serve as guide for the human resource policy, aiming to maximize happiness and fairness for all stakeholders. And that ends the first part of my presentation for this evening on Chapter 5 on ethical considerations in school leadership at the school district level. These highlights two theories. One is from Jean-Jacques Rousseau, which discussed the social contract theory, and the second is from John Stuart Mill, which discussed on the theory of utilitarianism. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening, and please be ready for the quiz, which will be facilitated by me right after this. Thank you so much.